My parents demand that I let my brother live with me and share my inheritance. I'm 24 years old, and frankly, I feel like I'm just a walking wallet to my brother Ted, who's 25. Growing up, it was clear that our grandfather, Gary, and Ted never really got along. Gary wasn't exactly the warmest person, but Ted had his own set of issues, like breaking stuff for kicks or just dropping dishes to see how people would react. It was like he enjoyed the chaos. Despite this, it never felt like my parents held him accountable. If anything, they just chalked it up to boys being boys, which never sat right with me. This behavior wasn't something I was taught to tolerate, and I certainly don't buy into the idea that parents are always to blame for how their kids turn out. Some kids like Ted just seem wired differently. Grandpa Gary passed away when I was 18, and Ted was 19. He left everything to me: the house, his car, a decent sum of money, and even his cats. My parents got some family heirlooms and a bit of cash from his life insurance, but the bulk of his estate came to me. We don't have other relatives like cousins, and our parents don't have siblings, so it wasn't a huge shock. Grandpa had made it clear to everyone that he wouldn't leave anything to Ted because, well, he thought Ted was a jerk. At the time, I remember overhearing my parents agree with Gary's decision, admitting Ted had always been difficult. He wasn't just difficult, he was a nightmare for me growing up. He'd mock me for my weight, steal my things, and even break my stuff just to upset me. After therapy, I've started to see how these experiences shaped my defensive nature. People have called me tough or even bitchy, but really, I'm just trying to protect myself from getting hurt again. Despite all this, my parents still had the audacity to suggest I should share my inheritance with Ted. We weren't even speaking then because of his constant bullying. When I refused, they acted like I was being unreasonable. But why should I reward someone who made my life miserable? After I moved into Grandpa Gary's house, things started looking up for me. I had my own space, managed to pay for college, and found a job I genuinely enjoy. Living on my own terms, I've invested the money wisely and kept a tight budget, enjoying a life Ted tried hard to keep me from having. Then last year, Ted waltzed back into my life. His wife had left him, and he was drowning in child support payments for his two kids. Since then, every visit to my parents' home has been a trial. They keep pushing me to let him move in with me and to help him financially, claiming that Grandpa Gary would have wanted it if he knew Ted had kids. That's just not true. Gary knew exactly what type of person Ted was. Visits to my parents are now rare and strategic. I try to time them when Ted isn't there, but somehow he always shows up, probably because my mom tips him off. Recently, he's been trying to cozy up to me, using every chance to hang out. We went to a bar once, and he immediately told the bartender to put his drinks on my tab, which I promptly paid in cash to avoid any misunderstandings. If Ted had been a decent brother, maybe, just maybe, I'd have considered helping him. But he's not. He's a leech, and I'm not interested in bailing him out. This might make me seem selfish to some, but I've fought hard for my peace and happiness. The last straw was during a family dinner when Ted tried to guilt-trip me in front of everyone, painting himself as the victim of our grandfather's supposed cruelty. My parents nodded along, urging me to think of family and duty. But as Ted spun his tale of woe, I saw the same manipulative gleam in his eyes that I'd grown up dreading. "I've had a really tough time, you know," Ted said, his voice dripping with a rehearsed sadness. "It's not easy being a single dad. I just thought, as my sister, you'd want to help out." The room was silent, everyone's eyes on me, waiting for me to capitulate as I always had when we were kids. But not this time. "Ted," I began, my voice steady, "I understand you're having a hard time, but let's not pretend you're interested in rekindling our sibling relationship. You're interested in what I can give you, not in me as your sister." My parents tried to interject, but I held up my hand. "I've made my decision. I'm willing to be part of Ted's life if he changes, but I will not finance his mistakes or his lifestyle. He needs to own up to his responsibilities." The evening ended with awkward goodbyes and frustrated glances. Since then, I've stood my ground, despite my parents' continued attempts to sway me. It's tough, seeing them so blinded by their favoritism towards Ted that they can't see the pain he's caused. So, here I am, seeking advice on how to handle a family that doesn't seem to value the same principles of fairness and accountability that I do. How do I maintain my boundaries without severing ties completely? Because as much as it pains me, they are still my family. But I'm tired of being the only one who seems to see Ted for who he really is, a bully who's never had to face the consequences of his actions. How do I deal with this without losing myself in the process? Now for the top comment before the update. Comment 1. You may want to put some distance between yourself and your parents. Make it clear you don't want to see Ted. If your mom texts him and he shows up, Leave, then decline their next invitation. And be clear about why you don't want to see Ted. Your parents may be super resentful and say you're being a bad daughter or sister, but those feelings are theirs to deal with, not yours. It can be difficult to establish boundaries, but you can make this one. If Ted is there, you are not. Maybe a couple of years down the road, you can relax your position, especially if Ted improves himself. But for now, having him around is just causing you distress and giving him an opportunity to try too much of you. And that thing with the bar tab was seriously disrespectful. Comment 2. Weird family. You have there. What strikes me the most is how your parents keep trying to palm Ted and his issues off on you instead of helping him themselves. You say nothing the parents tried to do to help Ted modify his obnoxious behavior as a child? Work that they really try all that hard. Whatever. If your parents want Ted's debts paid, they should pay the debts themselves. You are totally right not to be sucked into your parents' efforts to force you to get Ted out of their house and support him financially. That being said, is it weird? I actually find myself feeling a little sorry for Ted. His whole life is effed because of his obnoxious personality and actions. Nobody likes him. Not his sister, his parents, his grandpa, his ex, and probably not his kids. The guy should join the military and go far, far away. And Opie responds, yeah, it's not a huge surprise. Ted has been overlooked for a bit, and they don't want to deal with him anymore. Comment 3. You seem to be handling this very well, Opie. Consider letting your parents know that you only wish to spend time with them, not Ted, that you will leave if Ted is there. They will try more than once to push the issue, but each time Ted just happens to be there, when you were told he wasn't. You walk. You remind them of the terms of contact them, and you know Ted, or you leave. Then you walk out of the house, the restaurant, the bowling alley, whatever, back to your nice life. Unless your parents really want nothing to do with you, they will be forced to compromise and see you alone. They will push the damned envelope like you cannot believe it at first, but they can't guilt you if you're not there. Leave. Opie's edit. The bar tab thing is just one example of the many things he's done to me. He's done other stuff like going into my purse before I moved out. He used to steal from me all the time. He was 19 or 21. He stole money from me the last time. The fact that he put drinks in my tab and tries to make me feel bad about my life doesn't make me love being around him. Update 1. Hi everyone. Some of you have been asking for an update, so here it is. First off, I got fantastic advice in a PM. I wrote down what I wanted to say and then informed my parents I would be over to speak with them. I outlined everything that Ted has done to me in the past, from stealing to bullying to making fun of my friends. I told them that he has not changed and I would not be including Ted in my life. Ted hasn't asked for custody of his kids and never wants to see them. He just needs money to pay back child support. He spent the money on himself. He had it. He just didn't want to spend it on kids. He didn't want anymore. I let my parents know that I have invested the money given to me and was not going to be putting it towards Ted. When I die, the money would be going to a charity and that I planned to not be a cash cow for Ted ever. My parents were not happy about that. They told me they wanted Ted out of their house. He had been doing nothing but making their lives hard. I pointed them in the direction of a page about our state's month-to-month tenant laws. They gave Ted his formal get-out papers this morning. He has 30 days to get out or they will evict him. They wanted him to stay with me to feel less guilty. They thought I might be able to show him how to straighten up, if it hasn't happened by now. I doubt it would. I told them that they had screwed up by not fixing this when I was younger, that Grandpa Gary knew the type of person Ted was and left me the money for a reason. I wasn't going to piss on Grandpa Gary's grave by saying, "Here, Ted, never learn from your mistakes." Also, I hate Ted. I don't like being near him. I tried to hang out with him a few times just to see if he could change. Nope. Now he has the legal right to do whatever he wants short of a crime, and that makes him an even bigger a-hole. I'm an adult, and I can do what I like is a terrible power for a host to have. And Ted has it in abundance. He is a legal adult and a mental child. That's a bad combination. This is not to say my family is filled with saints. I learned a long time ago that I have some issues from my upbringing. However, I have tried very hard to overcome this. If Ted was trying, I might help, but he's not trying. I did, however, contact his ex and arranged to meet up with the kids to meet them. I let her know I wanted to be involved in their life, even if it's seeing her a few times a year. She told me that Ted said I was an abusive a-hole who stole his money. I let her know my side and clarified that she didn't have to have anything to do with me if she didn't want to. I just wanted to know my family. Their father being in a hall shouldn't mean the rest of the family is going to cut them off. She pretty much told me that she wants nothing to do with my family at all. My parents made her feel like a bitch for leaving Ted and demanded she let them help raise the kids. Knowing how Ted turned out, she wanted nothing to do with them, even if they are nice. She is afraid Ted will have access to the kids. From the sound of it, Ted might have been an unpleasant partner, so I sent them $500 for the holidays and to use in legal fees, letting her know it's not from Ted. Never was from Ted. Please do not count it towards payments owed. I also sent the kids a onesie and a little outfit, though they're too young to really know I sent presents. She thanked me and is going to be sending me some pictures through Facebook, and maybe I can meet them. She doesn't know. I guess she thinks I'm going to use this connection to help my brother. I let her know I actually want no contact with Ted, and he wasn't aware I had a Facebook. I also don't have my parents on Facebook, so it's not an issue. Hopefully I will be able to be in their life. If not, I completely understand why she might not want to. Anyway, I don't hate my parents. They have issues, but they usually are pretty cool. This has to be one of the most annoying things they ever tried to do. However, Ted getting kicked out is something I hope helps him out, as I won't be. So that's the update. Thanks for reading. Update 2. So things have seriously spiraled since my last update. Let's rewind to last week when my brother Ted decided to show up at my place completely unannounced. And guess what? He wasn't alone. He had a woman with him, someone I'd never seen before, and yep, a toddler in tow. I open the door, and there's Ted, looking like he's just lost his best friend, with this woman, Eliza, and her kid, who he introduces as Timmy. Ted lays it on thick. Hey, I know it's been rough between us, but we're in a real bind. We just need a place to stay for a few weeks, just until we sort something out. Eliza, Timmy, and I have nowhere else to go. His voice had that forced sincerity he pulls out when he wants something. I'm not buying what he's selling, not for a second. So I told them we needed to talk, but not inside my house. We stood out on the porch, me with my arms crossed, them looking all hopeful and misplaced. Ted, you can't just show up like this. And who are Eliza and Timmy? Since when do you have another kid? Ted's explanation was as shaky as a house of cards in a windstorm. He met Eliza a few months ago, and she's supposedly down on her luck, kicked out by her family, the whole 9 yards. Ted's playing the hero, which we all know is just a role he assumes when he's the one drowning. I laid it out straight for them. This isn't a temporary hostel. I can't help you. Eliza finally piped up, saying they really had nowhere to go because her family wanted nothing to do with her. I felt a twinge for her, not going to lie. I went inside, grabbed some local shelter information, and handed them a bit of cash to get by. Ted looked like he was going to explode, muttering about how cold I was. Eliza, on the other hand, seemed genuinely thankful. They left, and I was left shaking my head, wondering what in the world just happened. But the real jaw-dropper came later that night. I get a call from an unknown number, and it's Eliza, only now she's crying, and the story spills out. Eliza tells me she's not actually Ted's girlfriend. They met a few weeks back, and Ted concocted this plan, promising to help her if she played along to make me feel sorry for them. The kid isn't his. She's just a struggling single mom he convinced to join his little deception. Hearing this, I was furious. But honestly, it was just so typical of Ted, always scheming. I told Eliza she wasn't at fault and that she did the right thing by calling me. I reassured her to keep away from Ted and use the shelter resources I gave her. Now Ted's calls have been coming in, but I hit the block button without a second thought. There's no room for his drama in my life anymore. But this isn't just about not wanting drama, it's about refusing to enable his toxic behavior. Since then, I've been wrestling with what to do next. The temptation to blow this whole story wide open at the next family get-together is real. I mean, should everyone know what Ted tried to pull? Part of me thinks it's necessary, just to show how far he's gone this time. But then there's that little voice asking if it's even worth stirring up more trouble. Will it change anything, or just add more stress to an already strained family relationship? And it's not just about exposing Ted or protecting myself. It's about what these constant disruptions are doing to my own mental peace. Every time I think I've set a boundary, something else comes up that tests my resolve. It's exhausting, constantly having to defend my decisions to my family, especially when it comes to Ted. So here I am, stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, I want to keep my distance, preserve the peace I've built for myself. On the other hand, there's this part of me that feels obligated to fix things, or at least try to. Maybe it's because they're family, or maybe it's just that old habit of feeling responsible for the messes Ted leaves behind. Either way, it's a lot to deal with, and I find myself second-guessing my choices. Should I cut ties completely? Is there a way to maintain some sort of relationship with my parents without getting dragged back into Ted's vortex of chaos? That's where I'm at now, trying to figure out the best way to handle a situation that feels like it's constantly moving the goalposts. How do you deal with a family member who's more than just a nuisance but a genuine threat to your well-being? And how do you protect your own emotional health without completely isolating yourself from your family? Honestly, Any advice or insights would be hugely appreciated because navigating this family minefield feels more daunting by the day. What's the right move here? How do I keep my sanity in a situation that feels increasingly insane? It's a puzzle I'm still trying to solve, and any help piecing it together would be a godsend. Update 3. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around for another update. You wouldn't believe how things have spiraled even further since my last post. I thought I'd seen it all, but apparently there's no end to the drama when Ted's involved. So here's the rundown. Not long after the last debacle, I got a call from my parents asking me to come over for what they described as a very important family discussion. Given everything that's been going down, I was naturally a bit skeptical, but I figured maybe they were finally ready to see things from my perspective. Boy, was I wrong. I showed up at their house, and it was like walking into a surprise party that you wish you hadn't been invited to. Not only were my parents there, ready with what looked like a rehearsed list of concerns, but Ted was there too. And they had even pulled in a couple of aunts and uncles and some cousins I hadn't seen in forever. The room was tense. Everyone seemed to be tiptoeing around, avoiding eye contact until we all sat down. The discussion kicked off with my mom saying they were all concerned about me, which quickly turned into a full-blown critique session about how I was handling the situation with Ted. According to them, I was being too harsh, not understanding enough of poor Ted's struggles. My dad joined in, painting a picture of Ted as this lost soul who needed just a bit more support from his family, especially his sister. Yep, that's me. Ted, of course, was eating it up, looking all somber and misunderstood. He had his act down, portraying himself as the victim, downtrodden by not just life, but his cruel sister who had everything. Apparently, Grandpa's house and a bit of peace count as everything these days. As they laid into me, I felt this mix of anger and disbelief. How could they twist the situation like this? It was surreal, watching them take Ted's side after everything he'd done. When it was finally my turn to speak, I didn't hold back. This isn't about family concern. This is about you guys refusing to see Ted for who he really is. He's not just messing up because life is hard. He's actively making choices that hurt people. I'm not going to support that. I'm not going to enable him. That set off a real storm. Everyone started talking at once, voices raised, with Ted jumping in to play the part of the wronged little brother, saying things like, "See, she just doesn't care. I'm your son too, but she got everything, and I got nothing." His performance was something else. I'll give him that. In the middle of this chaos, my Aunt Marie, who had been quiet most of the time, suddenly stood up. She's always been more of the observer type, but when she speaks, it's usually worth listening. "Enough of this," she said in that no-nonsense tone that's made her the unofficial matriarch since Grandma passed. "We're not here to gang up on anyone. If you can't see that Ted has a part in his own problems, then what are we even doing here?" Her intervention cooled the heads a bit and got some of the family whispering among themselves, maybe reconsidering the one-sided narrative they'd been fed. But my parents weren't having it. They continued to push for me to reconsider my stance and think about what family means. I left their house feeling a mix of frustration and relief. Frustrated that the family I grew up with was so willing to turn a blind eye to Ted's manipulations, but relieved that I stood my ground, that I didn't let their pressure change my stance. Since that day, my phone has been a constant source of stress, buzzing with texts and calls from family members. Some are supportive, telling me they understand my decision. Others are just as manipulative as Ted, trying to guilt me into changing my mind. It's been exhausting, to say the least. I decided it was time to take a serious step back. I've been limiting my interactions with the family to those who understand and respect my position. As for Ted, despite his attempts to reach me through various means, apologies one day, accusations the next, I've kept my distance. The whole situation has made me reevaluate a lot of my relationships, not just with Ted, but with everyone in my family. It's tough, realizing that the people you grew up with who should have your back can just as easily stab you in it if it suits them. But it's also been clarifying in a way. I'm seeing more clearly who I can trust and who I need to keep at arm's length. For now, I'm focusing on my own life, my job, my friends, my personal projects. Building a life that isn't defined by family drama is my #1 priority. It's not easy, and some days are harder than others, especially when I think about how things used to be. But I know I'm making the right decision for my well-being. Thanks again for all the advice and support. It's been invaluable during this insane period. I'm taking things one day at a time, and while I'm not sure what the future holds with my family, I know I'm heading in a direction that's healthier for me. I'll keep you all posted as things develop, but for now, just know that I'm hanging in there, staying true to myself and trying to find peace amidst the chaos. Update 4. After that last major clash with my family, I made a conscious decision to take a big step back from all of them. I really needed to breathe, to find out what life looked like without the constant stress of family drama. That decision wasn't easy. There were times I second-guessed myself, wondering if I was being too drastic, too cold, or too distant, but I stuck to it, because something deep down told me it was what I needed to do for my own well-being. The first few weeks of distancing were the toughest. My phone was eerily quiet, which was both a relief and oddly unsettling. The silence gave me too much time to think, to worry if I had made the right call. During this time, I threw myself into my hobbies, things I loved but had neglected for too long, like getting back into painting and hiking more seriously. Rediscovering these parts of myself felt like meeting up with old friends. I had forgotten how much joy these activities brought me, how they cleared my head and soothed my soul. As weeks turned into months, the new normal started to feel just that. Normal. I was less on edge, more in tune with what made me happy, and my daily life was noticeably calmer. This new headspace allowed me to reflect on everything that had happened without the raw emotions clouding my judgment. Then, out of nowhere, a text from my mom popped up one day. Just a simple, "How are you?" Nothing groundbreaking, but it was the first olive branch since everything had gone down. I was cautious, keeping my replies light and non-committal at first. Slowly, though, we started texting a bit more. I made sure to keep clear boundaries, and surprisingly, she respected them. We didn't dive into any heavy discussions. It was more about sharing little updates, which was a relief. Ted, on the other hand, has been completely off my radar. I heard through the grapevine that he moved in with a friend after finally being asked to leave our parents' place. He hasn't reached out to me directly, which I'm honestly grateful for. Whether he's genuinely started taking responsibility for his actions or he's just too preoccupied with his own life to bother me, I can't say. But the distance has given me much-needed peace. My relationship with my dad remains strained. We haven't talked much since the intervention. I get the sense he's still upset with how things played out, maybe even feels a bit betrayed by my strong stance. It hurts, knowing there's this wedge between us, but I've come to accept that not every relationship can be patched up, or at least not quickly. Healing, if it happens, will take time. The family members who have reached out have mostly been supportive, or at least haven't tried to drag me back into the drama. My Aunt Marie, who stood up for me during that last family gathering, has been an incredible support. She's become something of a family mediator, ensuring everyone respects each other's boundaries, which has been a huge help. This whole experience has been eye-opening in a lot of ways. It's taught me about boundaries and the importance of sticking to them, even when it's tough, even when it means stepping back from people you love. I've learned a lot about myself, about my limits, and about what I need in my relationships. It's been a journey of self-discovery that I didn't expect but am grateful for. Looking back, I can see how much of my energy was being drained by trying to keep the peace, by trying to be everything to everyone. It's not sustainable, and it's not healthy. This break has allowed me to rebuild my life the way I want it, focusing on what brings me joy and peace. So, here I am now, a few months down the line, feeling more like myself than I have in years. My life isn't free from challenges, but the challenges feel more manageable when I'm not constantly weighed down by family issues. I'm taking things day by day, enjoying the calm after the storm, and slowly rebuilding the relationships that matter on healthier, firmer ground. Thanks for all the advice, the kind words, and the support through all of this. It's been a wild ride, but knowing I had this community to turn to has made all the difference. I'll keep you posted on how things go, but for now, I'm just going to enjoy the peace and keep focusing on the positive changes I've made in my life. Here's to finding calm in the chaos and to a future that looks a little brighter each day. Update 5. So here's the latest. Ted ended up in jail. It's still hard to wrap my head around it, but it happened. The charges, financial fraud, serious stuff involving forged signatures and conning money out of unsuspecting victims. It's like something out of a crime show, except it's real life. And the person at the center of it is my brother. The news hit me like a freight train when my mom called, her voice shaking as she explained what had happened. Through her tears, she relayed the details and then, almost predictably, came the request that floored me. They wanted me to bail Ted out. After everything that had transpired, the endless cycles of manipulation and turmoil, they were asking me to step in and pull him out of the mess he'd gotten himself into. I asked my mom to give me some time to think it over, hanging up the phone with a heavy heart and a mind racing with conflicted thoughts. Part of me felt a tug of sympathy for Ted. Jail is no light matter, and the thought of anyone I know being in that kind of environment is unsettling. But then the larger, more rational part of me kicked in, reminding me of all the reasons I had distanced myself in the first place, of all the times Ted had chosen his path, heedless of the consequences and the people he hurt along the way. Those few hours of contemplation were some of the most introspective I've had. I thought about responsibility, what it means to really be responsible, not just for ourselves, but for the actions we condone in others. Could I, in good conscience, use my hard-earned money to bail out someone who had repeatedly shown such disregard for others? Was I obligated to help simply because we shared the same blood? The answer came to me clearer than I expected. I called my mom back and told her I couldn't do it. I explained that this was a line I could not cross, that Ted needed to face the consequences of his actions without me shielding him from them. It was an incredibly tough conversation. I could hear the disappointment and desperation in my mom's voice, but beneath that, a hint of understanding, perhaps. The decision not to bail Ted out didn't come without its own set of repercussions. I braced myself for a backlash that surprisingly never came. Maybe my family had expected my refusal, or perhaps they were too wrapped up in the crisis to muster the energy for another confrontation. Whatever the reason, the storm I'd anticipated didn't break, and in its absence, a sort of uneasy peace settled over us all. In the weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had transpired. There was a strange sense of closure in having made such a definitive decision. I realized that sometimes the most challenging choices are the ones that bring us the most peace. By saying no, I had not only reinforced my boundaries, but also reaffirmed my commitment to a healthier, more self-respecting way of living. Life has slowly started to find a rhythm again. I've been diving deeper into my hobbies and interests, reconnecting with friends, and generally trying to rebuild and reinforce the life I want to lead, one that isn't constantly overshadowed by family drama. My relationship with my parents remains tentative, marked by a newfound respect for my boundaries, perhaps born out of the realization that I am serious about maintaining them. I've also learned a lot about forgiveness through this process, not the kind that excuses harmful behavior, but the kind that accepts people's flaws while also accepting that those flaws don't have to dictate how I live my life. I've forgiven Ted not for his sake, but for mine, to free myself from the anger and disappointment that were weighing me down. And as for the community here, your support has been a beacon for me during some really dark times. Each message, each piece of advice, each shared experience has helped more than you can know. You've reminded me that even in our most solitary struggles, we are never truly alone. So as I close this update and hopefully this chapter of my life, I want to express my deepest gratitude. Life will undoubtedly throw more challenges my way, but I feel more equipped to handle them now, more aware of my strengths and my values, and more committed than ever to living a life that reflects them. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of my journey. Here's to moving forward, to learning, and to growing, no matter what comes our way.